The summer sun bore down on the cracked sidewalk as little Emily Harper stood behind a small cardboard box she had turned into a makeshift stand. A wrinkled, hand-painted sign hung from the front. "Puppy for sale, please help us." Beside her, a golden retriever puppy wagged its tail, too young to understand the sadness in Emily's eyes. Her jeans were faded, one knee patched with a mismatched piece of cloth. She clutched a paper cup with a few coins jingling inside, most from strangers who hadn't taken the puppy but had dropped change out of pity. People passed by, some offering polite smiles, most just walking faster. Emily's voice, soft and hopeful, would occasionally rise. "Would you like a puppy, sir? He's very kind." But no one stopped. Then came the tall man in a dark blue suit. He was clean-cut, sharp, and polished, the kind of man Emily usually saw in posters on buses, not in real life. He paused in front of her and looked down at the sign. The puppy barked and tilted its head. The man knelt. "Why are you selling him, sweetheart?" Emily looked up, her eyes too tired for a girl her age. She whispered, barely audible, "Mommy lost her job. We don't have enough food. She said we can't keep him. But he's a good boy." The man's breath caught. On the puppy's collar was a worn tag. "Max, if found, call Rachel Harper." His stomach turned. Rachel Harper. He had signed her termination letter. Daniel Carter sat behind the expansive glass desk in his corner office, the skyline of the city glittering behind him. But his eyes weren't on the view, they were fixed on the photo he'd taken of the little girl and her puppy. Her voice echoed in his head like a quiet alarm. "Mommy lost her job. We can't keep him." He turned the puppy's tag over in the image again. Rachel Harper. He remembered the name now. A month ago, his executive board had brought him a spreadsheet, columns of names, departments, and savings projections. "Downsize customer service," they said. "Trimming the bottom line." He hadn't looked at the faces. Just the numbers. Now one of those numbers had a name. A daughter. A puppy. A story. He ran a hand down his face. Was this how far they had fallen? That a child had to sell her best friend so her mom wouldn't cry. "Marissa," he called into the intercom. "Yes, Mr. Carter." "I need everything you can find on a former employee, Rachel Harper." Quietly. No HR alerts. No noise. "Of course, sir." He ended the call and leaned back, guilt pressing into his chest like a stone. How many other names had he signed away without thinking? How many Emilis were out there now, with cardboard stands and empty eyes? He picked up the picture again. This can't be the end of their story, he thought. Not if I can do something about it. Rachel Harper sat on the edge of a worn-out couch in their tiny one-bedroom apartment, trying to stretch a can of soup into dinner for two. The kitchenette behind her buzzed with a faulty fridge, and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing again. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, gently brushing the golden puppy's fur. Max licked her hand, sensing her quiet sadness. Rachel glanced at her daughter, her heart heavy. "Emily, I'm so sorry about your birthday. I know I promised something special this year." Emily looked up and smiled, the kind only a child who'd learned to live without would offer. "It's okay, Mommy. Max was my best present ever. And maybe someone will buy him, and we can get groceries and pay for the light bill." Rachel bit her lip, turning away before her daughter could see the tears gathering. She had tried everything since losing her job, cleaning homes, delivering food, even handing out flyers in the blistering heat. But none of it paid enough, and most days she came home with aching feet and barely enough for dinner. At night, after Emily was asleep, she'd cry into a towel in the bathroom, muffling the sound. And now, selling Max. The puppy they'd rescued just before her layoff. It felt like losing family. But when there's nothing left in the fridge and your daughter pretends she's full so you can eat the last slice of bread. You make the hard choices. Rachel looked over at Max and whispered, I'm sorry, boy. I hope you find someone kind. What she didn't know was that someone had already found them, and he wasn't just anyone. Emily sat behind her puppy stand again the next afternoon, the sun a little hotter and the cardboard sign a little more faded. Max dozed in the shade, occasionally lifting his head to lick Emily's hand. Her stomach grumbled, but she ignored it, she was used to that sound now. Across the street, Daniel Carter leaned against a lamppost, watching silently. This time, he wasn't wearing his crisp suit. In jeans and a simple polo, he looked like any other passerby. But inside, he was anything but ordinary. He crossed the road slowly, the weight of what he was about to do pressing on his shoulders. When Emily saw him, her eyes lit up. You came back, she beamed. Daniel smiled softly. I couldn't stop thinking about Max. He knelt down and rubbed the puppy's head, and Max responded with excited barks and a wagging tail. Is he still for sale? Emily nodded eagerly. Yes, but Mommy said don't let him go for too little. He's a very good boy. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to her gently. I think this is enough. Emily's eyes widened as she peeked inside, seeing more money than she had ever held. Wow. Mommy won't cry tonight. He smiled, his heart aching. Can you tell me where you live? I'll need to bring Max some of his things, right? Without hesitation, she gave him their address. Apartment 3B. Mommy's usually home after work. Well, not work, jobs. Daniel nodded, fighting the lump rising in his throat. Thank you, Emily. You've helped me more than you know. That night, Rachel stood frozen at the door as bags of groceries were delivered, fresh vegetables, meats, even Emily's favorite cereal. A note simply read. For the kindest little girl, from a friend. A week later, an email came. Position available. Better pay. Flexible hours. We'd love to meet you. She didn't know it was Daniel who had sent it. She didn't know he had called in a dozen favors to get her a role at a respected firm where she wouldn't be overlooked again. He never signed his name. He just watched from a distance, quietly repairing what he had once broken. The park buzzed gently with the sounds of children laughing, dogs barking, and birds chirping in the trees. Emily ran across the grass, her laughter rising like music. Max, his golden fur gleaming in the sun, bounded after her with joyful energy. Daniel sat alone on a bench, a coffee in hand, watching them from a distance. It had been a few weeks since that afternoon on the sidewalk. Since then, Emily's stand had disappeared, and Rachel had started her new job, stable, dignified, and far better than the one she'd lost. He watched Max run toward him with glee, tail wagging like he remembered his old friend. Emily followed, cheeks flushed and happy. He remembers you, she giggled, catching up. Daniel leaned down and scratched behind Max's ears. Of course he does. Good boys never forget kindness. Just then, Rachel approached, holding a small bag of dog treats. Her face looked brighter, rested, peaceful, with a soft smile that hadn't been there before. She gave Daniel a warm nod. Thank you for being kind to my daughter that day. She told me what you did. You didn't have to. Daniel simply smiled. Sometimes, the smallest voices remind us what really matters. Rachel didn't know who he truly was. And he didn't want her to. He stood, gave Max one final pat, and walked away through the trees. Behind him, a little girl played, a mother smiled, and a life quietly mended, because someone chose to listen, and then chose to act.